The night was warm and the sea was calm. The great yacht looked like a palace floating on water, its lights glowing bright against the dark sky. Music played from golden speakers and laughter mixed with the sound of glasses clinking. People were dressed in shiny gowns and costly suits. Every jewel sparkled under the lights. The smell of perfume was heavy in the air. Everyone wanted to show that they belonged to this world of money, status, and beauty. The guests did not just come for fun. They came to be seen. They spoke loudly about their new cars, their latest trips to hidden islands, their business deals that made millions. Every sentence was designed to show power. On the tables were towers of food, meat, seafood, sweets, enough to feed 100. Hungry people. But here they were, decoration as much as dinner. This was not just a party. It was a theater of pride. Then the music lowered a little as someone stepped onto the deck. It was not a man covered in gold chains or diamond watches. He did not have 5 people following him with cameras. He was alone, walking slowly. His clothes were simple, a plain jacket, dark jeans, and boots that looked comfortable, not expensive. He looked calm, not trying to impress anyone, and yet his presence made people whisper, "Is that Keanu Reeves?" One woman asked, her eyes wide with surprise. A man beside her laughed softly. "If it is, then where are his bodyguards? Where is his suit? He looks like someone who got on the wrong ship." Another voice joined. Maybe he didn't know. It was this kind of party. The whispers grew, moving like a wave across the crowd. Keanu walked further inside, but he did not rush to greet anyone. He did not wave for attention. He moved with quiet steps until he reached the railing and looked out at the water. His face was soft, almost thoughtful. The ocean wind touched his hair, and he smiled slightly as if the world outside the party mattered more than the gold and diamonds inside. But this calmness only made the guests stare more. They were not used to someone ignoring their game of showing off. A group of men with expensive watches leaned closer and one said loudly, "Look at him. No designer suit, not even a tie." The others laughed, enjoying the mockery. Nearby, 2 women whispered, "I don't understand. Isn't he supposed to be rich? Why does he dress so plain?" Their laughter had a sharp edge, enough that Keanu could hear, yet he did not react. He did not frown, did not turn his head. His eyes stayed on the horizon where the moonlight touched the water. His silence was almost powerful, but the people at the party mistook it for weakness. A tall guest in a white suit decided to make a bigger show. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Hey, friend, are you sure you're on the right yacht? The ferry is down by the docks." Laughter exploded around him, cruel and loud. Everyone waited to see how Keanu would answer. They wanted him to blush, to be angry, to defend himself, but he only turned his head slowly, gave a small, polite nod, and then turned back to the water. For a moment, the man in the white suit was silent. His victory felt empty. The laughter faded as people realized that Keanu's calmness could not be shaken. He refused to play their game. His quiet respect, even in the face of insults, left them unsettled. Still, the whispers continued. Some people shook their heads and muttered, "Strange man, doesn't even try to fit in." Others asked in low voices, "That really is Keanu Reeves, right? The movie star? Why is he acting so normal?" They were confused because in their world, fame was supposed to be loud, flashy, demanding attention. Yet here was a man more famous than most of them, choosing to stand like a quiet shadow by the railing. The night grew deeper, but the tension did not fade. Keanu Reeves had entered a world of gold and arrogance, but he carried nothing except his own calm and kindness. People judged him by his clothes, his lack of jewelry, his silence. But even while they mocked him, their eyes kept returning to him. Something about the way he stood there, humble and unshaken, began to pull more attention than the diamonds and champagne around him. It was the beginning of something none of them expected. For in a place where pride was the rule, his humility was about to leave the strongest mark. And though they laughed at him in that first moment, soon their laughter would turn to silence. The night on the yacht carried on with the same shine and arrogance. The music grew louder, the waves slapped gently against the sides, and the air smelled of sweet perfume, mixed with expensive cigars. The laughter of the rich echoed everywhere. And yet one man stood out not because of how bright he shone, but because of how calm he looked. Keanu Reeves stood near the railing, dressed simply, his jacket plain, his boots ordinary, and his face calm as he looked out at the horizon, but his simplicity made the crowd restless. The people who were used to being admired could not stand the sight of someone so famous choosing to appear so ordinary. They whispered, they laughed, and they judged. For them, wealth was like armor, and anyone without it looked weak. Soon the whispers grew sharper, turning into open disrespect. A group of men sitting at a corner table raised their glasses. One of them pointed and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Look at him, the man doesn't even try, no watch, no gold, nothing. This is a luxury party, not some street corner." The others laughed, one adding, "Maybe he lost his fortune, or maybe he never had one. He looks like someone's driver, not a guest." The laughter spread like fire catching dry wood. A group of young women near the pool joined in, pretending to pity him. "Such a shame, isn't he supposed to be a movie star? Why does he look like that?" one asked. Her friend laughed and replied, "Maybe Hollywood lied about him being rich." Their voices dripped with sarcasm. Their laughter rang louder than the music, drawing more eyes to Keanu. Even the staff, pressured by the behavior of the guests, began to hesitate. When servers moved through the crowd with trays of champagne, they avoided offering to Keanu first. They turned instead to the glittering women and boastful men. Some even looked at him with doubt, unsure if he was really supposed to be there. The image was painful to watch. The famous actor being treated like an outsider on a yacht he had every right to be on. A tall man in a shining white suit decided to push things further. He had been drinking heavily and wanted to put on a show. He walked closer and said loudly, "Hey, are you sure you're on the right yacht? The fishing boats are that way." He pointed toward the sea. His voice was mocking, sharp, and cruel. The people nearby burst into loud laughter. Their eyes sparkled with joy at the insult. Keanu turned slowly, his face calm, his eyes steady. He gave a polite nod, almost as if the insult had been a greeting. Then he looked away again, back to the horizon. His silence killed some of the laughter. The man in the white suit frowned, annoyed that his words had not drawn anger, but he forced a smile and returned to his seat, trying to cover his discomfort. Still others tried to keep the mockery alive. A woman walked past him, pretending to whisper but speaking loudly enough. "If you can't dress properly, maybe you should leave." Another voice followed. "Yes, this is not a place for simple people." The cruelty had turned from whispers to bold words. They wanted him to feel small. They wanted to see him break, but he did not. He stood still, his hands relaxed, his face calm, not showing even a trace of anger. It was as if he did not hear their voices, or perhaps he chose not to give their words any power. That calmness confused many. It made some guests uncomfortable because they realized he was not weak. He was strong enough not to answer insult with insult, strong enough to remain himself. In the middle of mockery, among the crowd, not everyone laughed. A few whispered quietly, "That's really him, Keanu Reeves. Why is he so different?" Some eyes carried respect because they knew what kind of man he was outside the screen. They had read stories of his kindness, how he rode the subway like an ordinary man, how he gave away money to strangers, how he lived without arrogance. But those voices were drowned by the louder laughter of the arrogant ones. The party went on. But the atmosphere around Keanu had changed. He had become the center of attention, not because of the wealth he showed, but because of the humility he carried. People judged him by his plain clothes, by his silence, by his refusal to fight back. Yet in their attempts to shame him, they revealed their own cruelty, and his calmness only made their pride look smaller. The truth was, the more they mocked him, the more he stood out. Not as a man to laugh at, but as a man who was different, a man who could not be shaken by shallow words. He was like the calm sea under the noisy storm of their laughter, and though they thought they were strong, it was his quietness that carried real power. That night they believed they had humiliated him. They thought they had proven themselves greater, but in reality, every insult they threw only planted the seed of their own shame. because soon the truth would rise, and their laughter would turn into silence. And on that yacht of gold and pride, it would be Keanu Reeves who left everyone speechless. The party. On the yacht grew louder as the night went on. The music thumped through the golden walls and the smell of wine and cigars spread in the air. People were dancing, laughing, and taking pictures with their glittering clothes. They wanted to show the world that they were important, that they belonged in this circle of power and wealth. But underneath the sparkle, a new kind of excitement was growing. More and more people had their eyes on Keanu Reeves. At first it was just whispers and quiet laughs, but by now nearly everyone at the party knew he was there. Some were amused by his simple jacket and plain jeans. Others were confused, but many were curious. They could not believe that a man so famous would stand quietly by the railing without trying to prove anything. His silence made him noticeable, and that made the arrogant guests restless. They wanted to turn him into a joke, to prove he did not belong. One man, holding a glass of wine, walked past Keanu and muttered loudly enough for others to hear, "He looks like one of the workers, not a guest." The people nearby laughed, repeating the line. A few even pointed toward him as if he was a strange sight on display. The sound of mockery rose and mixed with the music, and more guests started. Turning their heads, some pulled out their phones to take pictures secretly, thinking they would share them later to laugh about how Keanu looked poor at a rich man's party. The attention spread like a wave. Soon half the crowd had noticed. Conversations paused as people leaned closer to see him. The gossip passed. From group to group, "Why is he dressed like that? Doesn't he have millions? Is he trying to make a statement?" The laughter was no longer hidden, it was open, sharp, and loud. By the pool, a group of young women laughed as one of them raised her voice. "Maybe he came on the wrong boat," she said, pretending to pity him. Another answered quickly. Or, maybe he thought this was a charity dinner. Their voices carried across the deck, making even those far away chuckle. The cruel jokes began bouncing back and forth across the party like a game, and Keanu Reeves was the target. But he remained still, leaning on the railing, his eyes lost in the moonlit sea. He gave them nothing, no anger, no shame, no defense. His calmness was strange, almost unnerving. In a place where everyone fought for attention, his refusal to join the game was a quiet strength. And though many laughed, a few guests fell silent, watching him with something like respect. They whispered, "He doesn't care. Look at him, he's not even bothered." Yet the louder voices drowned those whispers. The arrogance of the party was too strong. The crowd wanted to see him bend. They wanted him to feel embarrassed. But every second of his silence only made them angrier. Their laughter grew louder, their insults more cruel. A man clapped his hands and shouted toward him, "Hey, do you even belong here? Show us your invitation." More laughter followed. Some even cheered as if it was entertainment. The noise pulled even more attention. Soon the entire deck seemed to be watching the scene. Some guests were laughing, others recording, a few curious. Ones just stood silently, waiting to see how it would end. Keanu had become the center of the party, not because of gold or diamonds, but because the crowd had decided to test him. In the middle of the chaos, the workers on the yacht moved quietly, serving drinks and carrying trays of food. Many of them noticed what was happening, and some exchanged nervous looks. They knew him. They had heard stories of his kindness in real life. They knew this was not a man to be mocked, but they could not stop the rich guests from their arrogance. They lowered their eyes and carried on with their work. The crowd grew thicker around him. Some people leaned against chairs, waiting for him to finally speak, waiting for a reaction they could laugh at. But Keanu did not give them one. Instead, he lifted a glass of water from the table beside him and took a calm sip. His movements were simple, quiet, but strangely powerful. He did not bow to their cruelty, and his refusal to answer was louder than any insult they could throw. Slowly, a different kind of silence started to fall. Not everyone, but a few people, began to realize the shame in their behavior. A woman in a red dress lowered her phone after recording and bit her lip, embarrassed by her own actions. An older man shook his head and whispered, "They don't understand. He is different." The party was still loud. But under the surface, cracks were forming in the arrogance. But for the majority, the mockery was still a game. They laughed and shouted, convinced that he was the outsider, convinced that they had proven their own worth. They could not see that in their cruelty they were only showing their own emptiness. For now they thought they had won. For now they believed they had humiliated Keanu Reeves. Yet what they did not know was that their laughter would not last. The night was far from over, and soon the truth about him would leave their voices silent. In that moment, as the crowd mocked and jeered, the seeds of their coming shame were already being planted. They thought he was small, but the truth would soon make him greater than all of them combined. The laughter and gossip on the yacht seemed endless. People were still whispering about Keanu Reeves, still mocking his clothes and his quietness. The golden lights reflected on the sea, music kept playing, and yet something in the air shifted. It happened suddenly, without warning, as the yacht moved farther into open waters. The waves grew stronger, the vessel rocked a little harder, and the proud guests stumbled on their polished shoes. A sharp wind blew across the deck, knocking over a few glasses. Champagne spilled on the floor, and the clinking of bottles mixed with nervous giggles. Some guests screamed playfully as the boat shook. For them it was just another thrill, another story to brag about later. But not everyone found it amusing. In the middle of the dancing crowd, one of the staff members carrying a heavy tray of glasses lost her balance. The boat tilted slightly and she slipped. The tray crashed to the floor with a loud sound, glass shattered everywhere, and the woman fell hard on her side. The laughter stopped for a moment. People turned to look. Some gasped, but most only stepped back so the mess would not touch their expensive shoes. No one wanted to ruin their outfits. No one wanted to risk bending down to help. They just shook their heads and whispered, "The staff should be more careful." The poor woman tried to get up, but pain shot through her leg. Her face twisted with hurt. She could not stand properly. Her hands trembled as she tried to push herself up. Before anyone else moved, Keanu Reeves stepped forward. He did not hesitate. He walked quickly through the glass and bent down beside her. His voice was calm and gentle. "Don't move, you might be hurt." He slipped one arm under her shoulders and carefully helped her sit up. The staff around him rushed closer, but he waved softly for them to bring a first aid kit instead of panicking. The guests who had mocked him earlier stood frozen. They watched as he helped the worker as though she was the most important person on the yacht. He pulled out a napkin from the table and gently pressed it against a small cut on her arm where the glass had scratched her. "It's okay," he said, his voice low but steady. "You'll be fine, just breathe." His tone was filled with kindness, something that was rare in that glittering, shallow world. The woman's eyes filled with tears, not only from pain but from shock. She whispered, "Thank you, sir." Her words were shaky, but her gratitude was real. Keanu smiled gently. "No need to thank me. You work so hard for everyone else, someone should look after you too." The silence around them grew heavier. The same people who had laughed at him now stared, unsure of what to say. A man holding a glass of wine frowned, embarrassed. He had been mocking Keanu minutes ago, and now he felt small. A woman in diamonds turned away, her cheeks red. She had joined in the cruel laughter earlier, but now she saw the truth. While the rich stood back, unwilling to bend, the man they mocked was on his knees helping someone who served them. The crew hurried back with a first aid box. Keanu took it from them, opened it, and carefully wrapped a bandage around the woman's cut. He checked her leg, making sure she had not broken anything. His movements were calm, skilled, as if this was not the first time he had helped someone in pain. The woman's breathing slowed, and her fear faded, because she could feel his care was genuine. Around them, the crowd whispered again. But this time the tone was different. It was not cruel laughter anymore, it was disbelief. Is this really happening? Why would he care so much? Some of the younger guests took out their phones again, but now their videos were not to laugh at him. They wanted to capture the moment of kindness. The atmosphere had changed, the cruel game had ended, and something stronger had taken its place. The man in the white suit, the one who had mocked Keanu the loudest, tried to laugh again to keep his pride. "He's just doing this for attention," he muttered. But no one laughed with him this time. Instead, his words fell flat, and people turned away from him, embarrassed by his attempt to spoil the moment. Keanu did not look up. He did not care about the crowd. His focus stayed on the woman. When two other staff members came to support her, he stood and helped them lift her gently. "Take her inside. Let her rest," he said. His voice was firm but kind. The staff nodded quickly, thankful for his help. As they carried her away, Keanu picked up some of the broken glass himself, carefully placing it on the tray so no one else would step on it. His movements were simple, ordinary, and yet they carried a weight that no jewel in that place could match. A man who could have demanded the world was humbly cleaning the floor. The guests were left speechless. They had mocked him for being ordinary, but now that very ordinariness shone brighter than their gold. His humility was not weakness, it was strength. It showed them what true character looked like. The music started again, but the energy of the party was no longer the same. Something had shifted deep inside every witness. They had seen what kind of man Keanu Reeves really was, and though some tried to return to their laughter, they could not forget the sight of him kneeling beside a worker when everyone else turned away. That single moment had broken their illusion. The man they thought was beneath them had shown them all what real greatness looked like. And without knowing it, he had silenced the cruelty that had filled the night. The air on the yacht was different. After that moment, the sound of music still played, glasses still clinked, and laughter tried to rise again, but the memory of what just happened could not be erased. People had seen Keanu Reeves kneel beside a worker, had seen him lift her with care and kindness, and had seen him wrap her wounds when no one else moved. It left a mark, one that no one could laugh away. The crew whispered to each other as they passed trays. "That's Keanu Reeves, he's always like this," one young waiter said quietly. "I heard he once gave his own seat on the subway to an old lady," another added. Their voices carried respect. They knew stories about him. They had read about his kindness before, but now they had seen it with their own eyes. Still, not everyone wanted to admit the truth. A few guests leaned back in their chairs, crossing their arms. "He's only acting, he knows people are watching," one man muttered, trying to hold on to his pride. "Yes, maybe it's for attention," another woman agreed half-heartedly, but their voices were weaker now. Their words did not hold the same confidence as before, because deep inside they knew what they saw was real. Others began to notice the difference between themselves and him. They remembered how they had laughed, how they had insulted him, and how they had turned away when the staff member fell. The shame was quiet, but it grew heavy inside them. Our woman in a glittering red dress pressed her lips together and looked away. She had recorded him earlier for mockery, but now she deleted the video from her phone, unable to bear her own cruelty. Keanu, meanwhile, acted as though nothing unusual had happened. He returned to his spot near the railing, his face calm, his posture relaxed. He did not seek attention. He did not look around to see if people were watching. He simply stood there, enjoying the ocean breeze, as if his only purpose had been to help and nothing more. That quietness made him shine even brighter. A group of younger guests who had been silent finally spoke. "I don't get it," one said. "He could have shouted, he could have demanded respect, but instead he helped someone who works here." Another answered softly, "That's because he doesn't care about looking rich. He cares about being human." Their words spread slowly among the crowd, and little by little the mood shifted. Some people tried to return to their gossip, but it no longer had the same power. Even the arrogant man in the white suit who had insulted Keanu the loudest sat quietly now, staring into his drink. His earlier laughter had vanished, and every time he tried to smile, his shame pulled it away. He could not forget how Keanu had answered cruelty with kindness, while he himself had only shown arrogance. The staff on the yacht began to treat Keanu differently too. At first they had hesitated to serve him, unsure of his place, but now they moved with respect, offering him drinks with soft smiles. He accepted politely, thanking them every time. His gentle words surprised them, because they were used to rich guests snapping their fingers or ignoring them completely. For the first time that night, The workers felt seen, and it was because of him. The whispers grew into quiet admiration. That's why people love him, one man admitted. He's not like the rest, another nodded. You can tell it's not an act, it's who he is. Those who had mocked him earlier now avoided eye contact. Some tried to change the subject, others forced laughter at something else, but their voices were hollow because deep inside they all knew they had been wrong. Keanu's calmness became the center of the evening. People found themselves watching him even when they didn't mean to. It was not the diamonds, not the designer suits, not the champagne towers that held their attention anymore. It was the quiet figure standing by the railing, untouched by arrogance, carrying only humility. And slowly, the party no longer felt the same. The loud boasting softened. The proud laughter lost its edge. It was as if his presence had reminded everyone of something they had forgotten. Something simple yet powerful. Respect. Even the waves outside seemed calmer now. The sea reflected the lights of the yacht like stars scattered across the water, and Keanu looked out at it with peaceful eyes. His silence spoke louder than the voices of all those who had tried to mock him. In that moment, the balance of the night shifted completely. The guests who had thought themselves great suddenly looked smaller. Their jewels felt lighter, their words weaker, and their pride thinner. Because standing before them was a man who carried no gold, no arrogance, no loud voice. Yet his kindness had silenced them all. They still didn't know the full truth. They still didn't know why he was really there. But already their hearts were unsettled. Already they felt a weight pressing on them, a weight made of guilt, respect, and confusion. And though they tried to hide it behind glasses of wine and fake laughter, they could not escape the thought that perhaps the man they had tried to shame was greater than all of them put together. The night was not over, and the biggest revelation was still to come. But by this point, the cracks in their arrogance had already begun to spread, and it was Keanu Reeves who had created them, not with wealth, not with power, but with humility. The night grew deeper, the waves calmer, and the stars brighter above the yacht. The music still played, but it was softer now. The energy of the party had changed. People were no longer shouting about their wealth, their businesses, or their power as loudly as before. Many of them kept stealing glances toward Keanu Reeves, the man they had mocked only an hour earlier, the man who had helped a worker while they had stood frozen. They thought the moment had passed, but something else was about to happen. Something that would break the pride of the arrogant guests completely. When the yacht's host finally stood up, the room grew quiet. He was a tall man, respected among the rich, and his voice carried easily over the crowd. He raised his glass and smiled. "Thank you all for joining me tonight," he began. His words floated above the party. "It's a joy to see so many familiar faces and to celebrate life on this beautiful night." Everyone clapped politely. Some lifted their glasses, ready for the toast. But then his smile deepened and his tone shifted. "But tonight, there is someone here who deserves a very special thank you." The guests turned. Their heads curious, they expected him to name one of the wealthy elites. Maybe a partner, maybe someone who had sponsored the evening. But then his hand lifted toward Keanu Reeves, standing calmly near the railing. His voice grew stronger. "This man here, he made tonight possible. What many of you do not know is that part of this evening, part of this very yacht gathering, was funded by his generosity, not for himself, but for others." The crowd froze. The whispers that had filled the night fell silent. A few glasses paused in mid-air. Some guests blinked, unsure if they heard correctly. They had spent the whole night mocking his plain jacket and simple shoes, and now they learned he was the reason they were even on the yacht. The host continued. Keanu Reeves contributed to this event to help raise funds for workers in the film industry. Many crew members, the people who work behind the cameras and never get the spotlight, have been struggling. He wanted this evening to be more than just a party for the rich. He wanted it to mean something. And so, while many of you came here to show wealth, he came here to show kindness. Gasps filled the air. Some guests put down their drinks, others covered their mouths. The truth struck them like a wave. The man they had laughed at, the man they had insulted, was the reason they were enjoying the night. His money had helped pay for the yacht, the music, the food, but he had not done it to show off. He had done it quietly, with no announcement, no pride, no need for credit. The man in the white suit, who had mocked him most loudly, felt his face burn red. He remembered his cruel words, his sharp laughter, and now he realized that without Keanu he wouldn't even be standing there. The shame crushed him. He lowered his eyes, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The women who had joked about him looking poor now stared at their jewelry with empty eyes. Their diamonds sparkled, but they felt worthless compared to the quiet generosity of the man they had mocked. The host raised his glass higher. To Keanu Reeves, a man of true character, he said firmly. His words were filled with respect. The staff clapped first, their faces glowing with gratitude. Then slowly, the guests joined, though many clapped with shame in their hearts. The applause echoed across the deck, but Keanu only gave a small nod. His smile was soft, almost shy. He lifted his glass just a little, acknowledging them without arrogance. It was not the clap of pride, it was the clap of respect. And yet the sound only reminded the guests of how wrong they had been. For hours they had judged him by his clothes, his silence, his calmness. And now they realized those very things were signs of his greatness. He didn't need to boast. He didn't need to shine with gold, because his actions spoke louder than their words. The whispers started again, but they were different now. "I can't believe it, he paid for this," one woman whispered. Her friend nodded slowly. "And he didn't even tell anyone. He didn't want credit." Another man shook his head. "All of us showed off, but he gave quietly and we laughed at him. What fools we are." Keanu stood quietly as the applause ended. His voice was calm when he finally spoke. "Thank you, but please, don't thank me. Tonight isn't about me. It's about remembering the people who make everything possible, the ones who don't get seen. They deserve more than applause. They deserve respect." His words cut through the air like a gentle truth. His tone was so humble, so real, that it sank deep into the hearts of those who heard it. Some guests felt their throats tighten, because in that moment, they saw the difference between him and themselves. They had spent the night chasing attention, but he had spent it quietly giving. They had mocked him for not looking rich, but he had proved richer than all of them in spirit. The silence that followed was heavy. No one dared to laugh anymore. No one dared to mock. The truth had settled over them, clear and undeniable. The man they thought unworthy of the yacht was the very reason they were there. And not only that, he had done it for kindness, not pride. The night that had started as a stage for arrogance had turned into a lesson, and every guest on that yacht felt the weight of it. Keanu Reeves had not raised his voice, had not demanded their respect, but he had earned it. And in doing so, he left them speechless. The applause faded slowly, but the weight of silence that followed was heavier than the music or the sound of the waves. The rich men and women who had laughed at Keanu Reeves earlier now stood frozen. Many of them tried to smile, but their lips felt stiff. Their laughter could not return. They looked at him differently now, no longer as an outsider or a man who did not belong, but as someone greater than all of them. The truth was out, and it had cut through their arrogance like a blade. Those who had insulted him the loudest felt the shame burn inside. The man in the white suit who had mocked Keanu as if he were on the wrong yacht kept his eyes fixed on the floor. His pride had been torn apart. He wanted to disappear into the sea itself. The women who had giggled about his cheap clothes shifted uncomfortably in their golden chairs. They pulled at their diamond necklaces, but the sparkle no longer gave them pride. It only reminded them how shallow they had been. Keanu did not gloat. He did not smirk at their silence or their shame. He simply stood by the railing, his face calm, his eyes steady. He seemed almost untouched by the reveal, as if none of this mattered to him. To him, helping people was natural, not something to boast about. And that humility made the silence even heavier. The guests realized that the man they thought small had just shown them all how small they truly were. The host tried to ease the tension by raising another toast, but his voice did not carry the same excitement as before. People lifted their glasses weakly, their minds still replaying every insult, every cruel laugh, and every moment they had judged him. The guilt weighed on them more than the gold on their wrists. Slowly, a few guests approached Keanu, hesitant and unsure. A woman in a blue gown stepped forward first, her face pale. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for earlier, she whispered. Her voice shook. Keanu turned to her, his smile gentle. There's nothing to apologize for. We all make mistakes, he said softly. His kindness only made her eyes fill with tears, because she knew he was giving her more grace than she deserved. Another man, older and proud-looking, walked closer and extended his hand. I misjudged you, sir, he said, his voice low. Keanu shook his hand with no hesitation. It happens. What matters is what we choose to do next, he replied. Those simple words carried more strength than any speech. They sank into the hearts of everyone listening. The man in the white suit, however, could not bring himself to step forward. He sat with his glass, staring into it as though it might hide him. His earlier arrogance now felt like chains around his neck. He wanted to say something, but the shame was too heavy. Every time he looked up, he saw Keanu's calm face and remembered how cruel he had been. The words stuck in his throat and he looked away again. The crowd, once so loud and full of mocking laughter, now avoided speaking too much. Their pride had been broken, their arrogance replaced with silence. Some of them whispered to each other, He is greater than all of us and we didn't see it. Others shook their heads. We laughed at the very man who gave us this night. How foolish we were. Workers on the yacht, who had been silent all evening, now looked at Keanu with open admiration. Their eyes shone with respect. They whispered among themselves about his kindness. He is different, one said. He treats us like people, not servants. For them, this night would be remembered forever, because they had seen the difference between empty pride and real greatness. Even the sea outside seemed calmer. The stars reflected on the water, and the breeze carried a softer touch. It felt as though the world itself had paused to honor the truth. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their glittering gowns and sharp suits, because no matter how bright their clothes shone, they knew their hearts had been exposed in front of everyone. Keanu remained quiet, sipping from his glass of water. He did not lecture them. He did not need to. His actions had already spoken louder than any words could. He had shown them humility, kindness, and true strength without raising his voice once. The silence was not empty. It was full of lessons, full of shame, full of realization. And though no one dared to laugh anymore, their minds were filled with thoughts they could not escape. They would remember how they had mocked him, and they would remember how he had answered with nothing but kindness. The man they had tried to belittle had left them speechless. He had not only silenced their insults, he had silenced their very pride, and in that silence the truth shone brighter than the diamonds they wore. That night, as the music played faintly and the yacht drifted over the calm sea, the guests realized that greatness was not in wealth, nor in arrogance, nor in jewels. It was in humility, in kindness, in respect. And they knew that Keanu Reeves had shown them all what true greatness looked like. The night was drawing to an end. The music was softer now, the laughter weaker. The proud voices of the rich had lost their shine. The yacht still glowed with golden lights. The sea stretched wide and endless, but the mood among the guests was heavy. They had started the night mocking Keanu Reeves, treating him like an outsider, but now they stood in silence, ashamed. Their pride had been broken, their arrogance exposed. Keanu, however, seemed untouched. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the calm water. The moonlight lit his face, and there was no anger, no bitterness in his eyes, only peace, as if the cruelty of the night had never reached him. He had carried himself with dignity from the start, and now he stood quietly, reminding everyone that true strength does not need to shout. Some guests still tried to act normal, lifting their glasses and forcing smiles, but their eyes betrayed them. They could not forget what had happened. They could not erase the image of him helping the fallen worker, of him being revealed as the one who had secretly supported the event. Their jewels and designer clothes suddenly felt meaningless, because they had been silenced not by money, but by kindness. A few brave ones stepped forward, offering soft apologies. But Keanu's replies were always the same, gentle and forgiving. "It's all right. We all learn," he said. His humility only deepened their guilt. He did not lecture them. He did not boast about his generosity. He simply let his actions speak, and that silence was more powerful than any speech. The man in the white suit, who had mocked him most loudly, sat still in his chair, his face pale, his pride crushed. He wanted to speak, to apologize, but the words never came. He was trapped in his own shame. His earlier laughter echoed in his mind, reminding him how small he had been. He realized he had tried to measure a man by his clothes, and now that mistake weighed on him like a heavy stone. The staff on the yacht looked at Keanu with respect that glowed in their eyes. They whispered to one another, grateful for what they had seen. "He is not like the others," one said. "He treats us like equals." For them, that night was unforgettable, because it proved that kindness still existed, even in a world filled with pride. The guests, on the other hand, knew the night had taught them something they would never forget. They had arrived thinking wealth was everything, thinking power came from gold and diamonds, but now they knew how wrong they had been. They had seen a man walk into their circle wearing plain clothes, and without a single word of boast, he had shown them all the meaning of true greatness, as in... The yacht neared the shore. The lights of the city grew closer. The guests stood quietly, some staring at their reflections in the water, ashamed of who they had been at the start of the evening. Their jewels no longer sparkled with the same pride. Their voices no longer carried the same arrogance. They knew they had been changed. Keanu Reeves picked up his jacket and prepared to leave. He did not wait for praise, he did not stay for attention. He walked toward the exit with the same quiet steps he had arrived with. But now, every eye followed him, not with mockery, but with respect. Some even wished they could stop him just to say more, but they knew he would not want it. He did not come for recognition, he came for kindness. The silence followed him as he stepped off the yacht. The night air outside was cool, the city lights. Waiting in the distance, he disappeared into the dark, leaving no trace except the memory of what he had done. But inside the yacht, his presence still filled the air. The guests remained speechless, their thoughts heavy, their pride shattered one by one. They realized the lesson of the night. Greatness is not in the clothes you wear, not in the money you spend, not in the way you boast about power. True greatness is in humility, in compassion, in how you treat others, even those you think are beneath you, especially those you think no one is watching. The guests had begun the night laughing at him, but they ended it ashamed. They had tried to push him down, but he had stood taller than all of them without even trying. And as the yacht finally docked, each of them carried the same thought in their hearts, that they had witnessed something rare, something unforgettable. Keanu Reeves had walked in quietly, mocked for his simplicity, insulted for his clothes, ignored for his silence. Yet he left having taught them all a lesson they would remember forever, a lesson that no amount of gold could buy, a truth that would echo in their hearts. They had laughed, but in the end, it was his humility that left them speechless. And though he would never speak of it again, the people on that yacht would carry the memory of that night for the rest of their lives. They would remember the man who walked in quietly and left them all in silence, not because of wealth, not because of pride, but because of kindness.